You are listening to the Enormocast.
Hey folks, have you been waffling about renewing your Access Fund membership? Or joining for the first time? Or maybe you're just feeling like you should donate some money because you love climbing and hate the government. Well, I know waffles are delicious, but now's the time to put down your phone, then pick it up again, but this time close TikTok, and go to accessfund.org because from the 4th to the 16th of December, Black Diamond is matching your donations up to 80 grand. Hell, if you've got 80 grand lying around, why not just cut the suspense and get this over with by donating all of it today? Black Diamond needs climbers. Nay, they are climbers. And climbers need climbing. Voila, this all makes sense. The Access Fund is our tireless guardian at the gates against closures, abuse, overuse, and overreach by the government. So hurry up and help Black Diamond spend its money to protect your climbing today. And if you hear this after the 16th of December, 2023, I hope the future is bright, but you're way overdue to join the Access Fund. That's accessfund.org. Join today. Happy holidays from the Enormocast and Yeti. I'm going to keep this short. No voices today.
You sure about that, Chris?
Yonder, I told you to take the day off.
Sorry, I'm going.
Where was I? Do you need a perfect small gift for friends and family that will actually get used? Then look no further than the Yeti Yonder water bottle. Tons of colors, a few sizes, and now Yeti has introduced 2 new cap options. Lighter tethered caps and a cap with a straw that Kathy and HR will just love. Personally, I still prefer the Bomber Chug cap if you're asking. Anyway, the Yonder water bottle is just a nice idea for a lower cost gift. Check them all out at Yeti.com or your favorite shop. And of course, tell them Yonder sent you.
Chris!
What?
You got any beers in this fridge or what?
Just a minute, Yonder. All right, I gotta go. Enjoy the season.
Listen, where are you playing in town? You playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
a
big
house. We
place,
sold
that
it
side
out.
of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold
What's
it
that,
out.
20,000
seats.
We really should.
The hell are you doing? I couldn't sleep. I'm checking the ropes. There was a frayed end on your rope, and I'm cutting it out.
Bad weather. No, later, anytime.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, La Sportiva, and with support from Maxim Ropes. Maxim has been keeping the Enormocast off the deck since 2012.
And now, we can also thank the chill folks at Yeti. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout to get a great deal on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is December 6th, about 10 p.m. here in Colorado, 2023. And this is episode 276 of the Enormocast, a conversation with climbers, alpinists, gentlemen, Jordan Cannon, Jesse Huey, and Matt Segal. And what's on tap today is a deep, detailed, often hilarious account of their recent ascent of Trango Tower, aka Nameless Tower, and specifically the second ascent of Cowboy Direct, a route put up by Todd Skinner et al. In 1996. So 27 or so years between those two ascents. And this is a fun one because these guys are all friends of mine. Just letting these guys kind of run with their ideas, talking about their relationships, talking about the interpersonal stuff going on the route, but also details about the climbing, some good stories, and kind of a how-to in a lot of ways. These guys were relatively unsupported on the Trango, just up there, the three of them, getting it done. But before we get to that, I will make an announcement. The long-shuttered shop over there at enormocast.com is open for a very moderate sliver of business. I gave up on doing merch because it's a huge pain in the ass. Doesn't really pay off. You know, I mean, you put up a shop on your site, you got to pay sales tax, file sales tax. You got to run your shop, which always is crashing your site. You got to deal with customers having problems with their cars, blah, blah, blah. Packing it, shipping it. Anyway, the margins were pretty low, but I decided to go for it. I have a few t-shirts left over there, really bad sizes, but have a look. Small men's, few women's left. Just getting rid of those. They're priced to sell. You might be a little disappointed in your sizing choices, but if you have a kid who wants a t-shirt, they're there. But I also have a new product over there. I've got the Bermuda Triangle drinking game koozies up. And that's the new item. That's the reason I reopened the shop. So what's the Bermuda Triangle drinking game? Well, some of you deep, long listeners know what I'm talking about, but go check it out if you're curious. And also, koozies are relatively inexpensive and make a nice little gift for the Enormo fan in your life this Christmas, or Kwanzaa, or Festivus, or Hanukkah, although Hanukkah I think starts tonight or tomorrow night. So might be too late to get. Well, actually, if you ordered them right away, I might be able to get them to you by the end of the, is it 8 days? By the end. They might show up on the 8th day. I'm not that familiar with the tradition. But nevertheless, if you're not into any of that shit, well then just buy one because it's December and it's ice climbing season. I don't know. All right. The shop, Enormocast.com. Click on shop. It's janky, but you can get what you need. Also, you can pay for stickers over there, even though I generally give them away for free. A lot of people try to pay me for them anyway, which is nice of you, especially because I just had to send out, or in the middle of sending out like hundreds right now, which I wasn't expecting when I put them on the internet, the new sticker, the tattoo sticker. So if you're the kind of person that feels guilty about free stickers, well, you can go buy some over there. And for the moment, I'm like overwhelmed with sticker requests, so fucking chill out. But I will try to get them to you by the 25th of December. Oh, and I tried to set it up for like Europe and Canada. I might have. It might be working. I have no idea, actually, until someone tries to buy something. I'm sure it probably cost me like $50 to send you guys a fucking koozie to Latvia or whatever. So I don't know. If you want something like that, maybe it'd be better just to get in touch with me. In the U.S., I'll give you free shipping, though. Huh? Who's your boy? All right, one last little moment of commerce here. Don't forget that this holiday season, you can buy gifts for your friends from a couple of climbers, namely Peter W. Gilroy and Belay Specs. Okay, those coupon codes still work. Haven't been hitting them that hard in the last half of the year because I brought Yeti on board and, 3 commercials is more than enough. But PeterWGilroy.com has not sold out. It's still just a small business. Peter's a climber. He makes amazing accessories, amazing jewelry. I mean, gifts of all sort of price points, from thousands of dollars down to tens of dollars to get a hat or something. So don't forget PeterWGilroy.com. Enter Enormo at checkout, and also don't forget belayspecs.com. Do you have anyone in your life still staring up at the cliff with their neck bent like an idiot? Then get them some Belay Specs. You can still get a discount over there by entering Enormocast, belayspecs.com. All right? Support those guys. Just dudes doing it. No big corporate thing there. All right, let's get to the interview. It's actually just the first 2/3 of the interview. I'm going to put the second part of it out as a tweener. It'll be out in a couple days. Actually, I won't wait 2 weeks, so don't worry. This installment goes right up till they get to the summit, pretty much. And the second installment is a lot of reflection and also the descent, which, as most of you know from reading the stories, if not doing the deeds, the descent is at least half the battle. So there's some interesting stories in the second half. So they'll pop right out on your feed over the next couple days, so look for that. Hope you enjoy this. It was a lot of fun to record. I just kind of sat back and listened a lot, actually, as these 3 guys kind of had revelations that even they didn't know about each other, which was a lot of fun to watch. So I hope you dig it. And one last thing before we go, is it's that time of year where Sportiva, in their just deep, deep kindness and love of the Enormocast, let me embarrass myself with this particular ad that's coming up. I love it, but I also hate it. But I love that they let me do it. I mean, they've got this amazing reputation, and I just throw it in the garbage with an ad like this. So Hope you enjoy this ad as well as the interview. Let's get to an excellent adventure with Jordan Cannon, Jesse Huey, and Matt Segal.
Hey, Bobby, you going ice climbing this winter? Well, all right. Why don't we tell them how to keep their toes warm up on those icicles? Yeah, swing them tools, baby. Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but in the gym it's quite delightful. But you don't want to know, so ice climbing you will go. But the crummy boots you've chosen will keep your poor toes frozen. Pain builds character, you know, so ice climbing you will go. With Sportiva boots fit right, you love going out in the storm. Even when you grip too tight, up the icicle you'll be warm. Under the boards the bros are spraying, but indoors you'll not be staying. Let Sportiva take care of your toes, so ice climbing you can go. Remember this winter, that frozen feet, losing your toenails, and bashing your front points around like a drunken Cossack dancer is not just, quote, part of ice climbing. Do it better, warmer, and with pleasure in exceptional ice climbing and mountain boots from Sportiva. All right, Bobby, let's take him to the moon. 2, 3, instead of loudly whining, or with the barfies you start crying, be a boss up on the flows with Sportiva around your toes. Cha-cha. Hey, Bobby, why don't we sled on over to Sportiva.com or our favorite local shop and check out them boots?
So I was wondering if you guys could describe the level of like familiarity you had with each other or friendship you had with each other before you went on this expedition. I think that might be an interesting place to start. Like, who knew who and who didn't know anybody, and
I'll dive in.
And what level of that? Because I know you guys are buddies.
Yeah,
and Jordan was sort of brought in. So what's the triangular part of it?
Yeah, the menage a trois.
The menage a trois level of the expedition party.
Jesse, Huey, and I have lived together, or we don't live together anymore, but we lived together for like 8 years.
He ruined that by getting married.
He ruined that by getting married, and they kicked me out. But no, we've been really good friends and climbed all over summer and winter together for almost 10 years. I had climbed with Jordan once before. I think Jesse the same, maybe like one time before, but we had like hung out in social settings. But yeah, we didn't know Baby Boy, as we started calling him, as being the youngest climber on the team, that well at all, I would say, before. Yeah, there was really not a history. Yeah.
I never referred to him as Baby Boy.
Yeah, that's really just Matt. I didn't know
it's really Allie who started that, just so you know.
I didn't know that either of them had lived together for as long as they had. So I went into the trip knowing that they were good friends, good partners already, based on things I'd seen them do together the past few years. But then, it kind of dawned on me they're way closer than I thought, and I had to kind of find my place within their already very strong partnership. But yeah, I had just climbed with Matt once here in Moab, Jesse once up in Squamish, and then we had hung out a lot. We have a lot of mutual friends. We've been to some weddings together, been to some events together. So enough to know that, like, when you go climbing with somebody the first time, you can kind of tell like whether or not you can get along with them and their climbing style. But then hanging out with them in person is more important, I think, for a expedition where you're going to spend a lot of time potentially in a tent and not actually climbing. So got to make sure you get along. Yeah, but I mean, you guys had no way to know.
Well, Jordan and I had spent a lot of time at Arc'teryx events.
Right.
And, that time together, I mean, I know he's a good climber.
Sure.
I watch his Instagram. Who doesn't? And I feel like I could judge his character, and I could get along with him really well. And Matt and I had talked quite a bit about, just this whole objective as a pair. And I just was like, I'm not going to go unless we have a third person. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and I kind of felt the same way for sure. It's just
well, what's the philosophy there?
To take a step back, we kind of did know it was going to be a dice roll with Jordan, but it was like there was enough, like the odds were enough in our favor, and we could like read the game enough to like trust that it was going to be okay. But there was a part that we were like, oh, we really haven't spent that much time. We don't know. But the philosophy with 3 is for one, it's like a massive endeavor, commitment from the training to the 6 weeks away to the financial aspect of it. It's pretty common that someone gets sick. So you're like, okay, like that's like, if someone gets sick, you could at least function as 2. Was one of the main things, safety, just like having 3 people feel safer in the mountains a lot of the times to me. In retrospect, I don't think we even could have done it with 2. Like the workload alone was just massive. Like we needed 3 people. And that's like, in terms of teams that have like freed the mountain, like that's a slim team, without like already having lines fixed.
Basically. Well, in terms of teams that have freed the mountain, I mean, they've all had support.
Yeah.
Whether or not that, it's shown in the videos or not, but I mean, it's a massive amount of effort to get everything in place.
Did you know that? I mean, where was like your understanding versus the reality?
I didn't understand. I knew it was going to be like a lot. And for me too, like I'm like a little guy, you know what I'm saying? And like, it's like always my largest like insecurity and like fear as like a climber. Jesse's like super fit dude and he's got 50 pounds on me. Like I'm just like a scrawny little guy. So like I just can't physically carry as much shit. You know what I'm saying? So it's like
that's how we feel when we go sport climbing with you.
But like, so like for me, I'm like, dude, I think we just need help just to get to the base, like that kind of scenario. So I knew that 3 was gonna be like the way. And there was the safety issues of like our partners being like, well, like what happens if something happens? Like it felt safer to them for us to have 3, which is a big piece of it too. And both of them know, our significant partners know Jordan and they're like, we love Jordan. Yes. Great. That was like kind of a piece of it. But to go back to that question is no, I don't think any of us had as much of an idea of how difficult it actually was going to be.
I think 3 is the perfect number for a trip like this, at least, because with 2 people, it puts a lot of pressure on, one member of the team over the other. And then, yeah, you can just get sick and tired of hanging out with the same person. And so I like to think that with there's checks and balances with a party of 3. If like I'm acting crazy and like you guys both don't think I am, you can balance that out. Be like, Jordan, you need to, get your shit together. Like, you know what I mean? But as well, I think it gives a lot of flexibility for the team to be able to ebb and flow with like the challenges of the whole expedition. There were a lot of times throughout our trip where I was having a bad day and Jesse was charging or Matt was charging. It was kind of constant like back and forth between the 3 of us. And so having 3 gave us a lot more flexibility to.
You guys went over there to climb the mountain, but and obviously you've brought back all this media. You've been having a really good time with it. Part of the media is actually how that the team stuck together, that you guys became stronger friends, which we'll get to in a little bit. And maybe that's all just like PR smoke. Like it's, it's like the Ryder Cup or something where you guys on TV are going to be like, yeah, we love each other. And then as soon as they're like cut, you're like into your own limos. Later. You guys all came in 3 separate limos and you'll, leave in 3 different doors. But there wasn't like a production with this, because that's the other thing is when you see these climbing films, and it is depicted as like this either lone climber or this like these 2 people up there. You're like, well, who's holding the camera, or how did those ropes get up there already to have the camera person above them? And we in the industry realize that also is a level of support of the Ascent that just comes along. I mean, they're carrying loads. They are a safety valve. You guys were just alone, right? The 3 of you, or was Austin Sayedek like sneaking around in the shadows behind the camera?
It was just us. We've all been around the production end of gathering media.
I mean, you're all sponsored climbers heavily.
Yeah. And I think to that end, inevitably it changes the experience a bit. I mean, with this climb, we didn't have any margin in our timeline to deviate off what we did by, hours, on the whole expedition. And so we kind of knew that going into it. And the thought of having somebody there to film was attractive.
You guys were thinking about it.
We were thinking about it. Yeah. But it's also a really expensive trip. And, the day rate for a photographer for 6 weeks makes things a lot more complicated to find that budget for them, because they want to get paid and they should. But, it does change the dynamic. And we've all been there as a pro climber where you're at the base of the crux pitch and, the cameraman's in position, but you're not ready yet. And there's this pressure that kind of changes it. And I mean, for me, speaking from my experience with that, when it's really, really, really hard, that it kind of throws me off. And so it was special to me to do this as just a total guys trip. This is just a total soul trip. And if we can gather media, we have an extra person that could be on a fixed rope. We could have 2 people pushing the lines up and one person scrubbing the route and figuring out beta, or filming, worked out pretty well that way.
One of the things that we didn't even talk about, that whenever we talk about the team of 3 is there was numerous days that it's 2 people were climbing and then one person would leave early just to melt water. We had to melt water for hours a day. Most people don't think about that. There's so many arguments for the team of 3, but not having a professional photographer or videographer there was, we talked about it a bunch. And I think if we had one there, we probably wouldn't have done it. I think it would have been too much, just in retrospect of how it was. But I kind of agree with Jesse for sure, is that I think it's one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I kind of like that there was no real media. It was just us, I've only had a couple other ascents in my life that are really important and meaningful in the same way. And there's no photos of it. It's just kind of it's kind of cool to have something. And we got a lot of media, but it's different media. It's your homie who's brothers in arms shooting it versus a total third party.
Right. I mean, if it's actually going to turn itself into a film, then all of a sudden there's the possibility of the narrative itself getting out of your hands and becoming something that you didn't even really expect or believe in a sense. Yeah, which has certainly happened to all of our friends.
For sure. Yeah.
When the finished product comes out, they're yeah.
And I think
that's not exactly what happened, but
I think that's what's cool where we're at is we 100% own the narrative.
Right.
There's nobody else kind of, if we fuck up, we fuck. It's our fault, but there's nobody else kind of doing it. And I think that's we're all kind of excited about giving some presentations and slideshows. And
I think one of the interesting things about climbing as a trio, but the introduction of a third person into a really strong dynamic already, it has a chance to really go sideways. And I've seen that, and I've been on trips where that's happened. And I would say it's the number one contributor to people not finding success on these big trips. And so that, I'm just speaking for myself here. I don't have that much time to fuck around anymore. And so the third person, is so important that it is the right fit, or it's just, it's going to be a fail, and having been on a trip that, it's a big, expensive amount of time off. It's a big, expensive trip. And then, all of a sudden Johnny doesn't get along with Susie and, they don't want to hang out anymore. And then, the trip's just fucked. And you see it all the time, and just totally unwilling to kind of go there at this point.
I mean, it is this interesting dynamic of these guys having been, homies and lived together and the whole thing. What were your nerves? What were your worries as far as that's concerned, Jordan? Also, you were the newbie on this whole thing. I mean, in terms of expedition climbing, being in a cold, gnarly place like that, being at altitude, these guys had more experience than you did.
I can't say I had any nerves about the idea of climbing with them, as their third, even though they had a really strong partnership already. Didn't really question how I might fit into that all that much. That's really the main reason why I said yes, is because I was psyched to hang out and climb with these guys, and I trusted them and their experience and, their belief in me and inviting me on the trip and everything, I was mainly just thinking about whether or not I wanted to, invest that much time and effort into a place where it's really common to get shut down for a lot of things outside of your control, weather, getting sick, not getting along with your partners, a bunch of things. And, I've the past few years, I've kind of just been questioning how involved I want to be with alpine climbing, mainly because of the danger of it. And so that was kind of the first thing I thought is, what is the real risk up there? Are we able to mitigate it reasonably that I feel like comfortable going? And then, am I actually qualified? Can I make a difference to this team? I had to give up some sport, a summer of sport climbing in Europe that I had planned and like weigh the positive and negatives to that, which ultimately was, these kinds of trips don't come around all too often. And I have dreamed about going to the Trango. I never thought too far as to like when and with who, but for big wall free climbing, it's pretty high on the list. And so, once I wrapped my head around the idea that doesn't come around all too often, I was fully psyched to say yes and go with them.
All right, we'll come back to this friendship thing, but tell me a little bit about the objective. It was a second Ascent, Cowboy Direct, Todd Skinner, Bobby Modell, who's on the trip.
Mike Lilligren, and then Mike Lilligren's.
No, Jeff and Steve Bechtel.
Yeah, the Bechtels, and they.
But I think Steve got sick and went home.
Right.
So I'm not sure how. Yeah.
Interestingly, I think we've talked about this, but like, it was been a dream of mine for like a super long time. From Micah Dash. So like Micah, who was like my big wall mentor, put this objective in my mind. And I guess this trip was technically the third trip that was like attempted from me. Like the first trip was with Micah. He died. We didn't go. I had another trip planned, literally like down payment on the guide service, the whole thing with John Dickey and Eric Takaria. And it was the year that Osama was killed and Pakistan was unsafe to travel to. And then it just kind of sat as like a objective that was like this dream objective that like would never like happen. And for me, that's like the history of the objective, less about the actual ascent. The actual ascent was kind of an insane endeavor from Todd Skinner and like 5 of them that took over 60 days. I think they had to like extend their visa 3 times or something in 1995. And it was the first free ascent of the wall. But they really didn't get that much credit for it because I think maybe because they freed pitches all out of order and it was like kind of like this style of like establishing the line that not many people kind of like, I didn't get the respect that I think it deserved, The Hubers much later, maybe 10 years later, I don't know what year the Hubers did the Eternal Flame, and it was like, world news, like super, everyone was like, it's the first free, kind of scenario.
I feel like it had quite a bit of world respect. I mean, it was on the cover of National Geographic.
Yeah, I guess it did in like that, in like the broader climbing audience, I would say. I forget about that.
Well, when Todd Skinner freed this route, I was 1 year old. So let's not forget that. I was actually curious your impression of it, because for the way I understand it, the Eternal Flame was attempted first as a free climb, right, by the German team with Gulick and Kurt Albert, but then wasn't successful 100%. And then Todd and his team, established their own free line, and that was the first. Yeah, but I guess then when Hubers came, it does seem like
it not getting the credit that it deserved. That's maybe not the best thing to say because Jesse's right. It literally was on the cover of National Geographic. It was actually the first rock climb that was ever on the cover of Nat Geo, which is a super big deal. But it didn't get the kind of credit that the Eternal Flame got, in the sense that like nobody's been on that. I think we've heard of one other party since 1995 even being on that route.
First grade 7 free climb, which is
that's what I was going to say.
And it kind of brought free climbing to high altitude, right? Which I'm sure that maybe there's a bunch of stuff I don't know about, but in the limelight of free climbing hard at above 19,000 feet, that's kind of the front runner that I can think of.
I think you're right in the sense that if you ask anybody about climbing on the Trango Tower, and not even since the most recent media, they know about the Eternal Flame and the Cowboy Direct. If it hit hard when it happened, it definitely didn't become the legendary climb that on that.
I guess
thing,
that's all I was trying to say.
Yeah,
I feel like I downplayed it a little bit, which that's not what I was trying to do. But
who reads National Geographic?
I was more comparing it to the Eternal Flame.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it kind of launched. I believe it launched Bobby Modell as a photographer
for sure.
And that's
he was
what
actually the one
do.
on the cover.
Yeah, and he went on to do. That was his life.
And Todd's speaking career, I learned from Matt.
Yeah,
after this trip.
Yeah, I mean, Todd wrote a book on. Basically, it's a lot on business, but it's all around stories on his ascent of Cowboy Direct.
Yeah, and it's cool. And those guys were these. I mean, Todd really wasn't, but the rest of them were kind of these small town climbers too, from up in Lander and that area up in Wyoming. So yeah, it was not particular. I mean, Todd, that was the beginning of his career too, or towards it anyway. I mean, he became sort of our superstar climber of that era, but the other guys didn't. That was just something they went and did, and it's pretty wild. So I mean, that was in your brain for a long time.
Yeah, it'd been in my brain for like 15 years basically. Yeah. And Jesse can attest to this. Like there's been a topo in my room on a bookshelf like for over 10 years. Yeah.
So and like I said, the first time I met Matt and the first time we climbed together, he told me about that route and wanting to go do it. And
yeah,
I've always associated Matt with that to some extent.
Which has been funny. We talked on the drive over here, Jesse and I. I'm like, I've been like kind of low key depressed. Like I'm kind of like, what's next?
Oh, totally.
No. Like I'm just like,
that's not uncommon.
Yeah, it's totally.
I've had it. Didn't we talk about that?
Mm-hmm. I've had it. With, with big sends and stuff like that. But this one just feels like a little different because it was like I kind of always viewed this as like the end. And like it's not, but it's like it happened, and I'm like, oh, I don't have no idea what's next, but
yeah. And Lyle, tell me about the climb.
When you walk up to Trango, the scale's really hard to take in. We've all been in the meadow looking up at El Cap, and it just looks massive. And you're looking at Trango Tower, and it's as big as it is, but it's kind of hard to put it in perspective. And to put it in perspective, this training hike that Matt and I would do, we'd carry 50 pounds of water uphill. It's like 1,700 feet or so. And we'd do it a couple times a week and we'd dump our water out. I mean, that was not even a quarter. That was like a third of the approach gully to get to the base of the wall. So you'd look up and you'd be like, well, that will be our advanced base camp up there. And that was 3,000 feet from where we had our big base camp. So you have to hike about 2,800 feet up to advanced base camp. And then you hike another 1,500 feet to the start of the mountain. And all the while you're looking at Great Trango to your right. And it's the backside of it, but how big it is, and so you're kind of keeping this in perspective. And finally, when you get all your shit to the base of this notch, the route starts, and it's kind of the equivalent of maybe a free blast or so. Not quite as difficult, but probably equal in length. And there's a couple pitches of 511, and then a bunch of, kind of underrepresented on any kind of topo mountain climbing that's got waterfall ice, and it's got just a bunch of route finding. And then that takes you to a ledge. It's called Sun Terrace, and Sun Terrace sits basically at the bottom of the sweetest head wall you've ever seen in your whole life.
It's like as sick as it gets.
It's just this golden pillar. It's just a shield of granite that's red, and there's just crack systems literally everywhere on it. And you're just stunned when you get there, and you also can't breathe at all. And you literally walk 10 steps to go up a little snow slope to get to your stuff, and you're out of breath. And so all of that kind of starts at 17,500 feet. That takes you to Sun Terrace, which is at 18,500. You then down climb. If you're climbing the Eternal Flame, it's about a 5-minute walk from that bivvy. But if you're climbing the Cowboy Direct, you have to down climb probably close to 300 meters, not down necessarily, but horizontally, and maybe down 200 meters, maybe 150 meters, 2 or 3 pitches at least. And then you start on the shoulder, which goes at like a handful of 511 pitches, a 513 pitch, 12 plus pitch, bunch of 511 off widths to a hanging camp. And then the hanging camp is a portaledge camp where basically the Moonlight Buttress starts. And I'm like, that's not an exaggeration. It's 6 pitches of the most stellar 512 climbing I've ever seen in the mountains. Just absolutely laser cut, purple camelot, gray camelot cracks.
And hanging camp is at 19,500 feet.
Yeah, and literally sick. Like the 4 pitches off of the first 4 pitches off of hanging camp are unbelievable. Like they're like literally perfect crack climbing. It's like any crack climber's like wet dream, like just on its own, even if it was like in your backyard, you know, you'd be like, this is as good as crack climbing gets. So to have that up there, I think, like the climbing off of Sun Terrace was really cool. And like, you know, the hardest pitch, the 513 pitch, I sent it on a clear day and I was just like, this is fucking as cool as it's ever going to get. Like CK2, like, you know, at 19,000 feet climbing. And then we got to the climbing above the hanging camp and I was like, oh no, this is it's like pretty impressive, you know, like, I don't know, just that it's like, the difficulty didn't even really matter. Mind you, the difficulty was like, it was less about like the physical, like arm pump and more about like the heart pump of just like feeling like your heart's going to explode out of your chest. But the rock was just perfect.
And it's kind of like the Salothe or the Freerider Arano Cap, where you're primarily climbing one singular crack system from almost bottom to top. I mean, yeah, the route from Sun Terrace, I think the first 10 pitches is called the Slovenian route, right? One of the routes that you use to access these other routes on the head wall. And then same, like the real section that Todd kind of and his team established was like from the base of that snow slope up to hanging camp. And then I think from there to the top, it was a route that had already been aid climbed and they just free climbed it. So he kind of contributed like the middle section of the route.
And then from the top of the Moonlight Buttress, so to speak, you have, I think 5 or 6 pitches of kind of Patagonian granite with a bunch of mixed snow and ice. I mean, it was really similar to what you'd see on like Fitzroy or something like that, but at altitude.
Yeah. From hanging camp to the top is the Swiss Polish route.
But to answer your question, it's a 5-star classic route, hands down. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
Like really good crack climbing. There's really only one pitch of like the crux has a face traverse on it, but it's almost all crack climbing.
Who'd been that high before?
I had been that high quite a few times.
Oh, okay.
I told Matt from the beginning, Quentin Roberts and I, who you should get on this show if he hasn't been on the show.
Of course, yeah.
He and I went to Nepal a couple years ago, and we were trying an objective that's higher than this, and similar but not a free climbing based objective. And I just remember thinking, I will never do a trip like this without using an oxygen tent at home before going on a trip like this. No way. Because the to free climb or to just operate at that level, at that altitude, it's just, I mean, it takes a very long time. And so that hedged our position as a team. We all got altitude tents.
Yeah, from Hypoxico. It's like a brand, and you can rent them or you can buy them or rent them. We just rented them, and it sucked. Like it felt totally like you were sucked. It felt like you were on your trip before your trip, you know, like my fiance and Jesse's wife like hated us because it's like, you know, you're like basically sleeping it wasn't pleasant, but I think it helped drastically.
Yeah. And it's hard to put a finger on how much it helped, but having been to that altitude before, knowing how much it sucks. I mean, climbing 5-6, walking up to 18,000 feet from 9,000 feet, you can't climb 5-6. I mean, you pass out. I mean, you might be able to, you know, I'm exaggerating, but it really hedged our bets. And I think that along with many other things, it was just one of the small pieces to the puzzle, putting it together.
Weren't you like doing it in your tent? I mean, in your van and shit?
No. Oh. I had to like,
that's right.
I had to like live at a friend's house with a spare room that I could set up this tent in, because the highest I had ever been was only, you know, Mount Whitney, like some 14ers in California, maybe in the Diamond, you know. What about you, Matt? Was like,
I had been to like just under like in Ecuador, like high peaks, like skiing and like mountain climbing, but not
like what, 18,000 something?
No, like just under 6,000 meters.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I think Cotopaxi is like 20 something thousand feet. So
okay, so they had been up there.
But it's like you're just walking, right? Like you're like not like technically, like I mean literally we were climbing 12 plus at like 19.5. So it's a much different thing to be just walking in crampons at that altitude versus like climbing, 12 plus, 13 minus. Like that's way different. And like cognitively like functioning like at a high level,
Yeah, I mean,
high as I can. Like I don't
right.
function that high. So
yeah, you guys don't have a lot to work with. That's what you're getting at. Like not a lot of headroom.
No, I don't have a lot of wiggle room.
I mean, maybe you could describe it, Jordan. Like try. I mean, I don't know if you have the words, but like try to put us there. Like, because I mean, I'm thinking the same thing. Because like 12 plus for me here where I live is hard. And I will get pumped and I will get out of breath and I will fall off and like throw us into it at 19,000 feet.
Oh boy. I mean, simply just hearing like us say, how hard we were climbing, how hard we actually were. It's still hard for me to like wrap my head around the reality of that because I don't know. We have nothing like that in the United States. People always talk about climbing 513, 514 on the diamond at 14,000 feet, but yeah, it's a whole, advanced base camp is already above 14,000 feet. So, man, it is really hard to describe. I don't know if I'm capable, honestly.
I had a moment. I had a moment on basically one pitch, like above hanging camp that was 12 plus. None of us had led it yet. It was like my turn to lead it. And it was like, I got scared. Like, it was like the kind of the only time that I like, actually rock climbing that I got really scared because my heart was beating so fast and I literally felt like I was going to puke, piss and shit. Like I was like, should I take? Like I was done with the hard climbing. I was like in the easy section and my body would just like wanted to shut down because it was just like, I couldn't breathe, and, eventually I was like, no, you're fine. This is I guess what it's supposed to be like. I don't know. And went to the top, and did it. But like, that was like the hardest moment that I felt climbing on the trip, I would say.
I felt like you really had to pace it. If you were on a good finger lock, which, a lot of times you're in really good jams, if you were to like film me climbing a pitch at, in Boulder and then the same pitch up there, it'd be like 4 times slower.
And that's what happened. That's what was my experience was not pacing it and like kind of like pushing a little too fast and too hard and just like panicking. And I think that's the other thing too, is like, I think we all got a little not climbing at moments, different kinds of altitude sickness. Like nobody got really super sick. Jordan like threw up once and I had one really bad night, but it's like really the anxiety just makes that shit way worse. Like it's like totally like psychosomatic. Like, cause you think about it, like your anxiety gets your heart rate going and you can't like, so you're like, I'm like leading, I'm scared that I'm going to rip gear you, whatever, all the normal shit that goes on when you're like kind of climbing, and it's just totally exemplified by the altitude.
There's a huge trust you put into what you know as well. And I'm saying this as having been to altitude and knowing that you're going to feel terrible in the beginning. And, when we first got there, we had to go up on the wall twice before we actually went on the send push. And there are these pitches that are rated 511 and none of us were capable of freeing them. No way. It was just, you do like 3 moves and you just have no gas. It was just so hard to explain unless you've done it. And so you'd take and you get kind of down on yourself and you'd just be like, okay, I just have to trust in the system. I have to trust that in 2.5 weeks, it's all going to happen and, your body's going to adapt. And it's kind of remarkable how well it actually does work. But speaking of anxiety, you're just flailing on these pitches, just having a hard time getting up them. And then 3 weeks goes by and you're just hiking them, they feel like they're 5'10", and maybe they are, but you can't, it's hard to tell.
I was surprised, like on actual climbing, by the time we were acclimatized, I didn't struggle as much with the cardio aspect, but I did very much have a hard time sleeping every night. I had a hard time waking up every morning. And then anytime we had to do like a large, hike that snow ledge or hike to the notch from advanced base camp, I'd have like panic attacks where I just like couldn't breathe. but that never really happened to me climbing. So the climbing was easier, but trying to sleep at night, constant headache and just waking up feeling like total shit. And then, you're like out of breath, just walking out of your tent to go pee. And then you're like, we're supposed to climb 513 today. How is that going to work? And it somehow just did. I don't know.
I mean, the funniest thing is literally the easiest part of the trip was like the rock climbing.
Which is weird to say because it takes a week to get there for one. And then we put in 2 weeks of work, but to get the route ready to try and free climb, fixing lines and hauling gear and setting up camp and all that kind of stuff. That we, none of us had really climbed in like 3 weeks, really like free climbed. We're like, how the hell are we just going to start busting out 512? Like we all probably suck right now, but it did kind of just fall into place. Thankfully, by the time we had acclimatized and as soon as we started free climbing, things started to get a lot easier.
You guys say that the rock climbing was the easiest part. You speak for yourself.
I think the thing though too that's like worth a mention is like in objectives like this, like it's so much about strategy. Like Jesse said earlier, like the timing of the thing is like what he meant by that. He alluded to it is like we summited. It took us 3 days to get down. We got to base camp at night and had to be hiking the next morning to catch our flight, and that was like, there was no wiggle room, but like the strategy that we as a team, and I don't have like a antidote of like, this is what we did, this is what you should do, but it's more of just like the thought process that we had all put in our own accord, like over, for me, years, Jesse, months, Jordan, like the whole trip of like coming together and like figuring out what makes the most sense strategy wise, not even just like figuring out where to stash, where to fix, what to do, was like what set us up.
You can ask our wives. They heard about this ad nauseum.
Yeah. I mean, like Jesse and I were like, before we knew who was coming with us, we were like, okay, what do you think? Day 1, do this, day 2, like Bivy here. Oh, I don't know. Like,
dude, we talked ourselves in circles.
Yeah. But I think that's what, like, I think you kind of need to do that. Like,
yeah, I mean, Chris, that, like, that's what I tell people all the time about free climbing El Cap is that there are way better free climbers up there most of the time than there are wall climbers, and people get shut down based on their wall climbing skill and experience, not based on the fact that they can't climb the hardest pitch.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally said that back even when we did it, was that I'd rather be an amazing wall climber and a pretty good free climber than the other way around when you're up there.
That's all I got.
Yeah, and let it be known that Jordan was the amazing wall climber. His systems for sure kind of saved the day.
Well,
in terms of like,
things have changed, Matt.
Yeah. I think it was pretty funny. Summit day, like Jesse kind of took the lead because there's a lot of mountain pitches, a lot of snow and ice, and I'd been doing a lot more of that, and it's just like all the systems went out the door, and it was just like me and Jesse, just like gear everywhere, carabiners everywhere. Jordan is just like being the third, and just like I could tell, like he's like, I'm just gonna let this happen.
We're watching him have a panic attack.
I'm just gonna let these guys.
Carabiner's not on the green Camelot.
Like these guys are moving up the mountain. I'm just gonna let them do it, and I'm gonna like stay back.
But that's what Jesse's really good at, is the fast, alpine style. Get her done. And he did.
Well, that's as an inside baseball thing, we, knowing you guys all going over there, I know that Jordan is fastidious in his systems and his, I don't know, just keeping all of his stuff in order. And I thought kind of like that wasn't a worry, but I was like, okay, that's going to be interesting.
No, because I am very aware that I'm like a little over the top sometimes,
right? And
I can't expect the same level of attention to detail or perfection in my partners, and I've learned how to. You guys are just laughing at me saying this, but
it got to the point, Chris, where if there was a camp carabiner just on a sling, he would just hand it to me
every night. It would just be like there'd be carabiners handing. And there's one day he found a wild country carabiner, and I like saw the computing go on in his head, and he was like,
no, it was the day we were on Sun Terrace. I was like sorting all of our gear because their shit had just gotten out of whack. Right. And like, I'm sorting this gear, and I'm like, hey, what is this? Where does this go? Like, what's this for? And there was just like I'm like a BD athlete, they're camp athletes. So like our shit should be all of that, I like the continuity. And there was some random carabiner up there. I was like, what the fuck is this? And he's like, I don't know, man, throw it off the mountain. And I just chucked it behind me. I was like, good. That's exactly what I wanted to do anyways.
She gone.
All right, gone. Wild country carabiner.
That's not Leave No Trace, guys.
No, sorry.
That'll live on that glacier forever.
Yeah.
Oh man,
it was a big source of entertainment for everybody. Even myself. I mean, yeah.
Your need for organization.
Like they were pretty psyched to learn and like let me, show my ways, and like they let me organize their climbing gear at at Sun Terrace and everything
every night.
And I'd be like, all right, see,
I don't think we had a choice, but
well, it eventually became my job.
And throw your rack at him. Here, Mom.
No, Jesse and I would literally just like take our harnesses off with like all the gear on it and just be like, it's fine. And then
hand it to Jordan.
And then Jordan would just start
look at us and say, I need therapy.
You're like going to like bring your laundry home to Mom.
Yeah.
Like, here,
Yeah.
can you do
I'd be like, Jesse, this carabiner is supposed to be on your shoes. What's it doing over here?
Because everybody has a carabiner for their shoes, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. You can't just take a freaking rando from the rack. I'd be like, what is this deconstructed quick draw doing here? Like, you got to keep that shit together.
Oh my God. I love it.
Maybe it was like
those aren't the
element you guys
systems I'm
needed.
known for, though. That's just
Right.
my OCD tendencies.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
actual legitimate hauling and anchors.
No,
and
yeah,
fixing
and
ropes and that.
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
and that was what was really helpful, I would say.
So let me ask you. You guys got into the style, but the free climbing thing is kind of interesting to me because it's like the idea of free climbing. When you sort of break it all down, it's kind of absurd. It's like this weird game we play, and we have these rules, and they're a little bit arbitrary. The anchor to anchor, but where's the anchor? Where does it stop? Where's it? And we enjoy doing that down here at sea level or wherever, 6,000 feet here in Carbondale or whatever, playing those games. But don't they start to get a little absurd when you're, do you know what I mean? Like you've got, it's even, El Cap level too. Like you've got a 3,000 foot route and you don't free a meter of it. Like the whole thing falls apart. So, I mean, when you were up there playing these free climbing games, and we'll talk a little bit about style and how things ended up happening, but I mean, did it ever just like kind of overwhelm you with how kind of dumb it felt that you were trying to string these dumb pitches together?
This reoccurring feeling that I had on, maybe it was one of our last days, that the Yosemite decimal system belongs in Yosemite. You're up there and it's soaking wet, and you got to climb this 12A pitch that the storm's coming in, and both people are soaked and out of control, shivering, and they're like, one more go. And if you've been in a life-threatening situation when you're cold, it's it's one of those things that you don't forget. And being up there and having thousands of feet to rappel and being out of food already for almost a day and a half, and you're trying to red point a wet pitch of 512. It's a pretty sobering feeling. At least it was for me. And you kind of see the mania in it, and you see the obsession for what it is. And I'm alluding to the last pitch, which
the last like pitch of like kind of hard-ish rock climbing before it turns into like mountain climbing. Yeah. Which the mountain climbing was still hard up to 511.
Yeah. But you just kind of see it for what it is, and you're capable of it, and you know that if it were dry, you would have done it, 12 hours ago. And here you are at the end of the day, getting soaked, watching your buddies, freezing, getting soaked to the bone, and you're like, is this what it's about? I guess it is, but it doesn't really make sense. Doesn't really make sense. Jordan.
No, I think...
Yeah, just tell us the story of the pitch.
Of the last pitch?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the last pitch, like Matt said, the last pitch of hard rock climbing before the mountain, like alpine climbing to the top. And like looking at the topo, we would kind of estimate like, oh man, who's going to end up leading that pitch? And, I want that pitch. And since it was rated on the topo as a 12A dihedral, and Huey's known for his corner climbing, and he was all fired up. He's like, that's my pitch. And Matt and I were like, fuck yeah, I get it, you know? So we kind of went into the whole trip.
For months before the whole trip. That was like Jesse's
alluding
pitch.
to this.
Alluding to like
these projects up in Squamish and these corner, these like maybe the hardest corner climbing. I mean, some of the hardest corner climbing in the world, really. Yeah. That Jesse's been working on up in, yeah.
Like, dude, 19,000
have you seen these thighs? Have you seen these calves?
And he would
stem the shit out of that.
Exactly. So he had even mentioned like, oh yeah, I remember seeing photos, you know, when I was doing deep dive on Todd Skinner before this trip, researching about the route and everything. And so he kind of knew what it looked like. And, but you know, that it's one thing to have a plan. Doesn't happen very often that like it plays out that way. And so I will say, back to the party of three thing, in almost all aspects of the trip, having a third made it easier. In the free climbing sense, it made it a lot harder. You know, it takes a lot longer for three people to free every pitch. You know what I mean? Anyways, Jesse was planning to lead this pitch the whole time. Our kind of last day before our summit day, and it ended up that it was going to look like I was going to lead the last pitch. And we climbed up to it at the end of a really long day, actually a day we thought we were going to summit. And it dawned on us that we weren't. And I was looking up at this pitch. I was like, should I try this now or should we just go down? And it was pretty late in the day. And Jesse was like, you know, you can go up if you want. And I was like, fuck it, let's go down. I was like, this looks no problem. We'll do it.
I fell on the pitch below that. And so I had to redo that pitch.
Yeah. And important to note, like up until that point, like everybody had free climbed everything. We each led, one of the 13, the only 13 minus pitch, one of the 12 plus pitches, and then kind of pretty equally divided up like the other climbing, like
leading
wise, and then we'd follow because there is, you know, so it's like it was like feeling like a, you know, a balanced scenario of like trying to like each play our own part, you know.
Yeah, stylistically, we were all trying, like Matt said, to lead the crux pitches, and then aside from that, we just wanted every pitch to have been led by one of us, and then the other two would top rope. And so yeah, on our summit day, we get up there.
Wait, about how many pitches of like kind of that you said it, and the rock climbing, like pure rock on 38 pitches
total with the that's
climbing.
with the mountain pitches.
Oh.
It's probably close to 30.
Okay,
right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not
32.
looking for an exact number, just an idea.
Well, first of all, our summit day was absolutely splitter. We woke up, you know, to the moon rising on one side of the horizon, and then the moon setting on one side of the horizon, the sun rising over K2, and completely clear skies. And so that was one of 3 days on like our 12 days on the wall that was actually full day of good weather. And so I was thinking, man, no problem. We're going to get up there. It had like a light sheet of ice on it the night before when we rappelled. And so when I got up there in the morning, it was dripping wet a little bit, but not any more wet than we had climbed the whole trip. You know, I ended up climbing a lot of pitches in the snow. We all did. A lot of pitches were wet, but still free climbable. So I didn't think anything of it. And I went up on the pitch. And it's one thing for like a pitch to be wet, but then it's another for it to be like literally running water to the point that it starts going down your arm and into your jacket and into your shoes, you know? And I don't mind climbing stuff that's wet, but when it's running water, I start to panic because you can't really do anything. You're like, oh man, I can't hang on this jug anymore because it's going down my arms. I need to like go. So I made it through the first crux to a no hands ledge in the middle of the pitch, and then I ended up falling on the second half of the pitch, and then aided my way to the top and got really wet and cold in the process. And what I discovered at the belay is that there are these two hanging like snow fields on like dripping on the left side of the wall, down the crack, and then the face to the right. And I thought the best decision was to ask them to tag up one of our ice axes. I was going to chop out all the snow, and it was getting full sun. I thought it was going to dry in, you know, pretty quickly, but I kind of just like unleashed a waterfall onto the route, and it got way wetter and like slushy snow. And we could have waited for sure, but Jesse and Matt made a decision like we should just go try and summit, and then we'll try and free climb this on the way down when it's dry.
And I think at that point, though, like I was like, oh yeah, sure, of course, it's going to be dry by the time we get down. You know what I'm saying? Like I think like the leaving that pitch undone, like unfree climbed. I think like in my mind at least, I was like, oh yeah, like it's wet now, but you know the snow is going to melt in like a couple hours and we'll be fine.
We also didn't think it was going to take us that long to summit, so we expected to get back to there with plenty of time left.
Yeah, because that is like, according to the guidebook, it's like, quote unquote, 4 mountain pitches to the top. It was like way more. And who knows, like there might have been an easier way to go. Like it's like kind of choose your own adventure. Like you could have like corkscrewed the whole, whatever. We ended up doing probably 6 pitches to the summit and like some pretty long, sustained, like hard pitches, you know? So
I thought to myself, I was like, I probably could red point this pitch now, even with how wet it is now that I know the beta, but it's going to suck and I'm going to get more wet. And then Matt and Jesse both have to do it. We're all going to get wet. And it's just, you know, didn't think that was the best option. And so, yeah, we left this pitch probably at 10 a.m.
We were like, no worries. Mountain pitches, like we got this, like mellow.
Yeah, you should let them tell the summit story. But basically, we come back to this pitch after a long summit bid in the night at like 9 p.m. or something. So it's fully dark, and a storm is on the horizon. Like it's starting to start to lightly snow. And, you know, Jesse dropped his chalk bag. I have like no chalk left. We're out of food, and we're trying to rush. You know, we just had this euphoric summit experience. We're like, all right, now we got to get back down safely, but now we also have to try and like free this pitch that we couldn't do this morning, and we hope it's dry. And so Jesse and Matt led the like alpine-ish rappels to the top of this pitch where like the bolted anchors mostly start. And they're like, all right, Jordan, you go down, tell if it's dry. And I'm rapping down and I'm like, it's kind of more dry than it was, but it's also starting to snow, and like we need to make shit happen. And so I got down to the belay immediately. I still have my full Gore-Tex and my gloves on, and I'm just like throwing on my climbing shoes, my chalk bag, going full disaster style, not my normal, I want a nice clean belay. I want everything to be pretty before I start free climbing, basically. And they get down, and I was kind of like, man, we all have to free climb this pitch. I was like, I've already done the bottom half of it, and there's a legit no hands ledge in the middle. I was like, I'm going to jug up to that ledge. I'm going to fix the rope so that Matt and Jesse can start like micro tractioning and getting the beta. And then I'm going to see if I can do the top. And I just did the top, and I was like, that's good for me. Like, you guys have to have at the pitch now, you know? It seemed ridiculous to try and lead it at that point and all that. So, and that's when it seems, you're right. It seemed totally stupid. I was like, what are we doing?
Yeah. At that point I was like, okay, like, fuck, like I didn't like necessarily care that like the second half of the pitch hadn't been led. I was like, whatever, it's all been freed. Like, I want to free it. And was like, went up there. The first half of the pitch was soaking wet. I'd like whipped out of there. I like lower, and I'm like, go up there again. And I just like absolutely explode out of there. And I'm like, sorry, Jesse. Like, I'm like literally like look down at myself, and I'm like not in Gore-Tex, like totally dripping wet in a headlamp. Like, I'm like, dude, do you want to try? Like, I kind of want to try again, but I don't know. And Jesse's like, dude, we got to fucking go. Like,
and Jesse was honestly like, gracious. He was like, dude, like, it's all you.
Yeah.
Know?
Like,
if you're good, like, I'm good. And Jesse didn't even bother to try.
Yeah. And I was like, there's like, it's something that Jordan didn't mention is like, we were out of food like before that day. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we were like really out of food. I think I had like one bar that day, and like we still had to get down. So it was kind of like a hard decision, I would say, in terms of the antics of what like real free climbing is. But we had just the amount of effort, it seemed super insignificant for like literally one little section, you know?
I remember, walking up to the start of the route, there's this fix line that goes over an icy notch. And it's kind of, it's not ever going to make the topo, but it's probably like 5.7. And there's this fix line there. And I remember thinking, God, if I touch that fix line, is this not a free ascent? And then, I did it with like a Jumar on the line. So, because there's no gear, it's just, you're going to crater and then you're going to fall like 4,000 feet down the snow slope. And I put a Jumar on it and I was like, okay, I'm not going to touch it. And I was like, but if I did touch it, is that going to negate my free ascent? And I remember equating the two things similarly. I was like, so wait, is that, if I had like pulled on that fixed line, is that's not a free ascent? Is this 12A pitch now, this negates our whole experience up here? And I was just like, dude, no, this is so silly at this point.
I think that's a great example. And to Matt and Jesse's credit, like I said, the cards kind of unfolded for me to be the one tying in for this pitch for the first time. And it was wet and I fell, but I got the rope up, figured out the beta, and we moved on. And I think I was really only able to do the pitch at the end of the day and the style that I did it because of the time I'd spent on it that morning, and if I hadn't gotten to climb on it and then I'm trying to climb on it for the first time at 9 p.m. in the dark when everything's wet and cold, like I wouldn't have been able to do it either. So if Matt was the one leading that pitch, or if Jesse was the one leading that pitch, they would have been the one at the end of the day that would have freed it also. So it's like, it's not like I was able to do it and they weren't. It's just, that's the way it unfolded. You know what I mean? If that pitch was dry, all of us would have on-sighted it, no problem. And so it's like, what the fuck does it matter?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I just think, like I said, it's like the absurdity of what we do even here on a day-to-day basis when we're out free climbing and we red point and you don't grab the chains and you don't, all these different things. It's like when they become these like truly the conquistadors of the absurd, that the classic title, when you're down to that, like a meter, like what was it on top rope or was it leading or whatever. So it's fascinating. But I mean, you guys are stuck in the game. So you have to make these decisions and be okay with it.
I think for us, like the first thing was like for us all to be okay with it. And then for me, the other thing was just to be honest about it and like come out and be like, this is what happened. This is the deal. This is like, there's like, that's, our Ascent has an asterisk because of that pitch, which like, honestly, I'm like, whatever, big deal. Like, I don't know. It's like a lot of Ascents have asterisks, and the effort that I think we all felt like not only the effort, but like, I think what we all just gave to like standing on the summit was so drastic that like, I think 12A pitch isn't like, we're not allowing that to like take away from that.
Yeah. Cause personally, I think if we did let, if you do let a minor detail like that take away from your sense of accomplishment and satisfaction in the trip as a whole, you're kind of missing the point of that kind of climbing, Yeah, we set out with the objective of free climbing this route and we wanted to be successful, but at the end of the day, that's not the only thing that's going to make a good trip. We could ascent, but then like come home hating each other at the same time. Would that be a good success? No, not in my opinion. So I think, that was ultimately the goal. But when you go on a trip like that, you come away with so much more than a free climb or not. You come away with a really good experience, bonding experience that we all had, and that's what makes it worthwhile, I think.
I guess I'm thinking about just how the objective in my mind had kind of changed throughout the trip. In the beginning, I think we had about 2.5 weeks left, and there's a big storm coming through. And I remember thinking, there's just no way we can all free climb this thing. There's no way. Like, it's not going to happen. I was trying to be real and to myself, and yet try to be positive to these guys. And, I thought that it's possible to free climb the route with having one of us free every pitch. But I thought it was like much further out in the cards that we could all do it. And so, we'd have like kind of discussions, between chess games or, between eating
Jaipur,
playing
games
or whatnot. And I'd like throw that out there. And I think that the cool thing about a trip like this is that when you've climbed enough mountains, that the summit really isn't the objective, and the experience of going through the experience is the objective. Right. And so it became kind of clear I talked to Matt and he was like, yeah, I have no interest in not doing it team, like doing it individually, freeing each pitch. And maybe I had some insecurities about being the weakest free climber and being like, well, if I can't free one of these pitches and you guys do, then I'm left behind. And that definitely, I thought about it. I was like, well, that's okay if that happens. But in the end, I truly thought that we would probably have a good bid at doing a team free ascent, but that would be on par and the same as what the original guys did. And, that wouldn't take away from the experience, but it was more important to free climb the route than to get to the top of the route is what I'm trying to get at. And then all of a sudden that kind of got put in perspective when we were on that last pitch and we had climbed the route. And I personally just totally didn't care. I just, it was like that fixed line at the bottom of the gully that may or may not have pulled on that could negate this whole amazing experience with two of my best friends,
It was hard for me for sure. I wanted it, but at the same time, I was like I had a moment of like, Jesse was like, "You're soaked," and I was like, "Fuck, I'm so literally just drenched to the bone." But yeah, I think there was a lot with that, and there's even some things like just to take a step way back in the trip, like we basically the weather, like Jordan alluded to this, we had 3 good days of weather on our ascent. We started the push thinking that we were going to have to sit out 4 days of bad weather on Sun Terrace. And the reason why we did that was because if we took one more rest day at base camp, the bottom would have been totally soaked if this storm came through, and we wouldn't be able to free climb the bottom. So we really did try to set this whole thing up for trying to free climb, if that makes sense. So it was worth it for us to be able to free climb the bottom. And at least in my opinion, I was like, at least we would have free climbed the bottom and we wouldn't, you know what I'm saying? We're at least done that, and then we'll sit out a storm on Sun Terrace and inshallah, as I like to say in Pakistan, God wills, we'll make our way to the top. I'm also just the over positive one typically of it's not over until it's over. And I wanted the team, and I know Jesse was insecure of being he says the weakest rock climber, but that's not really, his experience level is much beyond Jordan and I's and actual granite rock climbing, my was we're all gonna fucking free climb this route. That was whether I said that on the trip or not, but that was my opinion was we're going to stack all the odds in our favor of all of us trying to do this.
Going into it, I was I don't care if we free climb this, I just want to stand on the top. So in my opinion, yeah, I tend to be pretty overly optimistic too, but I also try and set realistic expectations so I don't end up disappointing myself because with all the things outside our control.
So you guys did summit. So tell me about that day, because it sounds like you got a pretty awesome summit day, weather-wise.
I mean, it didn't come easy. The route finding was quite tricky, and we were kind of under this position of if you screwed up in one direction, you really didn't have time to correct for it. And so, and there was a possibility of potentially picking the wrong route and knocking a lot of loose stuff off.
And also just, I want Jesse to tell this story, but we each had one bar each at the, you we all forget about that, but we ran out of food.
I don't forget
the previous day. I just Jesse didn't say it, and to me that's the most important piece of this whole thing is we were hungry. You
can also talk about me
or
being
hangry.
very, very sad.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we're at the top of the technical rock climbing, and I take off, and I make a terrible decision not to wear crampons.
Yeah. Well, can we go to hanging camp? Or when you realized we were going to run out of food?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. Can we go to hanging camp when we realized we were going to run out of food? 2 days before?
Yeah. So Jordan decided that he was a hungry kid on this trip, and Jordan. So we have this enormous stockpile of food when we started this trip. I mean, it's enormous. I mean, it's probably
I literally traveled to Pakistan with a 75-pound bag of food.
As did I.
Yeah, like
and we told Jordan, don't bring any food.
I brought
we got
no
it.
food.
We got it all. We're good. And we're talking 4-pound bags of Golden Bear gummies with Twin Snakes, Haribos, like the whole thing. And
like also like real like Cliff Bars and Pro Bars and like nutrient dense food that was going to sustain us on the wall, not just gummy bears, Jesse.
So Jordan sees all this stuff and he just starts demoing the gummy bears. The gummy bears are gone on week 1. And then he finds our chocolate bars on the wall and he's just like, oh, we have chocolate. Let's eat some chocolate. Entire bar gone. Day 2. and yet I'm not like concerned at all because I'm like, we have like 120 pounds of food on the wall.
Dude, literally the whole time Jesse's like, no way are we going to eat all this food on this trip.
Well, we make it to hanging camp and we have exactly 28 bars, which 28 bars, when you look at 28 bars, it's kind of a lot of food. But, you pick that up in a bag and they're all like pro bars. They're like carefully thought out bars, calorie dense bars, if you will. And we do this thing where everybody's just grabbing bars for the day. And we're like, oh my God, we're going to run out of food.
Because it was just a free for all up to that point.
Yeah. It was like, it got to the point where we were like, oh, we're running low. It's too stressful. It's like, I kind of got stressed and it was too stressful I can't worry about like Jordan eating too many bars. We're dividing the bars and like, we're splitting the bars up. Everybody's going to get an equal amount. We had like a go fish round. Everybody like had draft picks, like everybody grabbed a bar and we divided the bars up that way.
And then you just like hoarded them. And looked at each other across the portaledge.
Well, it wasn't hoarding.
We
because
bartered, I wanted that flavor.
Right.
Jesse wanted this one.
So it wasn't hoarding. Everybody got to that point. At that point, everybody got an equal amount of food, and then dinners were split. This was just day food.
Right.
And
this is all the food we had left.
That's all. Actually, no, I take that back. This is all the food. Yeah. This was like all the food. At that point, there wasn't breakfast and dinner. There was just bars.
The thing we didn't run out of was coffee.
No.
Thanks
Lots
to
of
Matt.
Coffee.
Alpine Start.
Alpine Start.
Respect.
Alpine Start.
Hashtag.
But it was a little stressful where we all had like our own personal food bag, and we're at this we're at an actual big wall camp where we have to stay clipped in. We have to not drop shit.
Like your phone.
Yeah. And actually, like, there was one morning at camp where, Jesse dropped his phone, off this ledge. And I thought, like, based on his reaction, he was just like screaming, just like, no. I was like, oh my God, Jesse dropped his food. We're fucked. Thankfully, it was just his phone because we would have really been screwed.
So this is my version of the story. So Jordan sees, his third of the 28 bars, and he's like, "Oh my God, this is so much food that I can eat right now." And we head up the wall, and it's our quote summit day.
Well, we had calculated how many days we had till we summited too. So I was like, I was rationing based on that. And there was a day that we were like, we're going to the summit today.
That was the one where
and it was a fall summit day.
Right.
I was like,
but he didn't save a bar. Like
I don't know
it
what
literally
I was thinking,
took us
man.
3 days to get down. You know what I'm saying? He ate all of his food on this pre-summit day, and like fortunately, like I had like 2 bars left. Jesse had like 4 because he was like knew better. And
I was like eating a third of the bar at a time. It's like, oh man, has it been 3 hours yet? I can eat a third of the bar. Yeah, okay, good.
So basically, Papa Bear was able to give Jordan a bar for Summit Day.
I kept giving Jordan my day food, and which probably contributed to me losing 21 pounds.
Well, also the whole time we were joking about like, hell yeah, dude, the Pakistani diet. Not meaning like the food that they eat in Pakistan is going to make us skinny, but the Pakistan expedition trip diet.
Come home and start
Jesse
sending
and I
sport climbing.
like we're a little bigger compared to most sport climbers. We don't sport climb super hard, so if we lost like 15 pounds, we'd come back and we'd send the NAR. So
dude, I lost 15 pounds too. I came home and I could barely hold my coffee mug. Like,
so honest, although they're saying that I was like the hungriest and I was eating the most food and all this stuff, like when we came down to the rationing time, I was like, all right, yeah, this is how we're gonna lose weight. This is sick. Well, I wasn't honestly that stressed.
We were literally deciding on what we should do on how many calories it would burn. Like Jordan was like, well, I think I'm gonna just go up and aid this thing and see if I can just get to the top, and then maybe we'll keep going. We're like, ooh, is that a good is that a good use of the calories we have?
Hang on.
Like we got to
You guys
free
were
climb these
having that
things immediately.
conversation?
Oh yeah, 100%.
I was definitely not thinking that way.
At the point that we divided bars up, there was still a lot of work to be done. And honestly, there was even more work than we had like planned for. Like literally, like we had 3 days of descending. I don't even know. I think maybe we thought we were going to do it in 2. I don't even think we thought about it. Like I was like, oh, it's going to be a pain in the ass to get all the ropes.
Well, we
down,
thought
but,
about
like,
it. We just grossly misjudged it.
We missed,
I mean,
yeah. We didn't leave any food at Sun Terrace. We didn't leave like the only food that we had was at Advanced Base Camp, which was 3,000 feet of rappelling, like 300 meters of shuttling, loads on snow that was like roped up in like post-holing, like heinous conditions, and then 2,000 feet of like gully, you know.
Let's talk about our fall summit day and then our summit day with all the mixed climbing. Just lead us to the barbecue sauce. Because that's the day I ate all my bars and I have a good reason.
Yeah. So Jordan had an amazing contribution the day before. It was cold as shit in the morning. No one thought we were going to be free climbing. There was like this overcast kind of like ice layer in the sky. And all of a sudden it kind of felt warm enough to maybe do something, you know? I mean, I would assume it was probably in the 40s, but there's, you know, no sun. And the idea was, okay, let's just go up. Let's just start aiding, you know? And Jordan goes up and he aids the 12 plus pitch.
Because this was our first day waking up at hanging camp. And we were hoping for a good day of weather to make progress on like what we saw was the moonlight buttress of 512 splitters. And then we woke up and we're in a cloud and we're like, fuck, maybe we're not gonna be able to do anything today.
But progress is progress. And all of a sudden it felt kind of warm enough that Jordan's up there and he's like, I'm going to try free climb. And he starts on-sighting 512 after 512 pitch. And it was absolutely epic. Honestly, it was like,
it was sick. It was like, oh yeah.
and hands down, like one of the best 512 splitters of my life. And then one that was like legitimately the hardest effort I had to put out on the whole thing, because I was looking at it, I was like, man, this looks like a 510 pitch. I was like, this is going to be no problem. And then you kind of traverse down and right off the belay, and then you actually are looking at this crack, and you're like, oh no, this is 512, and it's unprotected for like 15 feet. And I'm like, start committing to these moves, like knowing that it's not going to be a sweet fall if I biff it. And then it conveniently starts snowing again, and I make it through, and I get some gear in, and I'm like determined to climb this pitch, and it took everything out of me that day, but we got like 3 pitches done. So
and that day was super cold, and so when you're kind of in support mode, it's really hard. It's kind of like going from aid climbing to free climbing back to aid climbing to free climbing. It's really hard to switch gears, and so when you're in support mode, you're kind of just drafting a bit.
Jesse microed 1 pitch. He got the bait on the 12 plus, and you supported, yeah.
And so the next day was our summit day, and Matt. I had like put some pretty key kind of ticks. I mean, I don't know if he would have needed them or not, but it was like, you know, the beta was gained to make the 12 plus as, I guess, I don't know, friendly as possible.
This was the pitch that I said. Yeah. I thought I was going to like puke, piss and shit.
But basically the main thing that day is like, I was like, all right, I did these 3 5-12 pitches the day before. I was like, you guys are leading today.
Yeah.
I'm drafting.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to be the third.
And so Matt and I had to climb a 12 plus at 512. And then another 512, and then it was my lead at a like a 512 that had some bolts on it. And I got up there and I was like, you know, I threw everything I had at this thing, and I got to the bolts, and it was just like, you know, you're 100 feet up, the rope drag is horrendous, and there's 2 bolts of like unbelievably insecure face climbing. I'm like, I gotta, you know, there's a stance there. I'm like, I gotta bring Matt up, and let's have Matt go at this. Or I tried it. I pitched again, and then Matt goes and he pitches, and then he finally gets through it. And then I take the lead and do a long 5-10 pitch. And I realize that I'm really cold, and it's largely based on the calorie intake. And so it's Matt's lead, and Matt, you know, you can see it in his eyes. He's similar to me because we've put out the same amount of output that day. And Jordan has basically, you Jumar'd the first, I guess you free climbed the first pitch.
I had to do the 12 plus, and then I Jumar'd 2 pitches, and then I was just following.
Also, you know, Jesse and I are being conservative with our bar intake too. Important to mention. You know, we're like,
and we're hauling the bags.
But
or were we hauling
the
the bags?
But no, I mean, I legit felt like I was drafting like you know, they were trying to lead these pitches, and it's hard to figure out where this shit goes a lot of the time, and so it's really time consuming. And I'm like a full pitch below them based on the style, like we were climbing as a party of 3, and I can't even see, like, I just hear them yelling, and I'm like, what the fuck is taking so long? So I'm just like hanging at the belay and like sleeping and like eating bars.
And then so I get
down those
this
bars.
is when I like go up the Matt mess
Rappers.
Matt's mess.
Yeah.
Matt's mess in Pakistan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, you know, we're still feel like we're sending. It's my lead. Jesse led a long pitch. It's my lead. I like go up this thing that doesn't look that hard, and I'm up there, and I'm like, fuck, like there's like no good gear. Like I'm like, this is kind of crazy. Like it's not that hard. Like, but I honestly I just get scared. Like I'm like I get to the point where like I don't have a ton of good gear. You have to kind of punch it. It doesn't look that bad, but like I was worked. Like I was like, I didn't have it, you know? So I like placed like a bunch of gear that I think is probably still there.
It's
Honestly,
still there.
It probably fell out because it wasn't that good. And lower to the anchor, and I get down, and I think like, you know, Jordan's like, okay, like I'll go up it. Like I'm looking up it, and it's like, okay, fine. And we like realize we look over, we look back at the topo, we're like, that's not the route, you know? The route's over here.
And it's this absolutely laser cut gray camlock crack. And I mean, it looks fierce from my opinion at this point in the day. I'm like, oh my God, that's what we have to climb right now. And it's probably 120, 130 feet. And it's just consistently fingers the whole way. And the rock at this point doesn't really have that many feet. And so it was kind of like this reluctance of like, oh God. And Jordan.
I mean, so yeah, we're all finally like rejoined on this ledge, and I see Jesse like legitimately bonking, like the first really only time on the whole trip that he was like low energy and didn't look that great, you know? And then Matt goes up to lead this pitch that, like we said, and it's listed to be 512. But it doesn't look that bad. But then he's like, I don't know, guys, like I don't got this. Like this feels wrong. And he comes down, and legitimately so, it wasn't on the right route or a route at all. I don't know. And yeah, so like he's feeling scared, and I just kind of got the energy. I was like, well, are we trying to fucking summit today? Because if so, like one of us has to do this pitch, you know? And so I was like, fuck it, I'll do it. You know, like let's try, and I want to summit today.
So
he had already eaten most of his bars.
Yeah, because I'm out of bars. Yeah, guys, I'm out of bars.
So
I'm gonna go ahead and mention it.
I had the benefit of drafting up to this point, and then yes, I had eaten a lot of my bars.
So this is a side note that's quite important at this point, is that we had prepped for this 4-day storm, and we brought an iPad that was loaded with Ted Lasso. Okay,
among other shows.
It didn't make it past Sun Terrace, but like it was at Sun Terrace.
Stylistically, you guys, come on.
So season 1, like maybe episode 10 or something like that, he says he's in this darts game.
No, I'm sorry, you're setting this up wrong. We all brought our iPads on the trip with various shows downloaded that we were psyched to watch, and Matt mentions, he's like, oh, like I got 3 seasons of Ted Lasso, and Jesse and I, having seen it, we were like, fuck yeah, that's an awesome show. And we were like, let us know when you get to the dart scene, which if anybody, sorry, spoiler, but if anybody who's seen the show, especially season 1, they know about this scene, you know? And so Matt was watching it at Advanced Base Camp, you know, he's like, oh, I'm at the scene. And we all huddled in his tent and like watched it on the iPad together. And it's a scene where, you know, Ted is having this dart competition with the previous owner of the club, and boy, this is actually harder to set up than I thought. But no, so Ted is essentially leading this guy to believe that he doesn't know how to play darts, and in the end, you know, he freaking smokes him. And he has this whole monologue at the end where he has to get like 2 triple 20s and a bullseye to win this dart game. And he starts going on this monologue talking about like, you know, my whole life, like people have always underestimated me, and I never understood why. And he goes through this whole like epic uplifting monologue, and he gets to the last shot, and you know, he just says barbecue sauce, and he throws the bullseye, and the bar goes crazy. You know, it's a really sick moment. So we had all watched this, and we had joked about it together, and I'm like tying in for this pitch, and I'm starting up it. I'm like feeling really good. I'm feeling really confident. And I get to this point where like I was pretty sure I was about to enter the crux, and I'm hanging at this rest, and I'm like chalking up, and I just look down at Matt and Jesse and say, barbecue sauce. and then I sent the pitch.
You sent it.
Yeah.
He sent it. Oh, God.
We're such dorks. But
I love that you told that story. I was supposed to tell that story about you. It would have been so much cooler.
Oh, damn, sorry.
It's all good.
At your presentation, set that up better.
up.
This is just rehearsal for that.
Yeah, no, legitimately, this is.
Going back to the mountain.
But you didn't make it to the summit.
Oh,
no, we didn't make it to the summit, and Matt followed that pitch he sent. Jesse almost did. He fell at the very end, and that's kind of how the order got switched for me to end up leading the last 5-12 pitch, because Jesse had to do that pitch the following morning when I was like trying the dihedral.
I like barely followed that pitch. There's a moment where my feet kicked and I like basically whipped. And
it was rugged. It was like 5 p.m., 6 p.m.
It was hard.
It was super cold, and we were totally gassed.
Yeah.
And
there's
it's definitely as hard as I tried on the whole trip.
After this pitch, I was like, all my fingers, cuticles, everything was bleeding. But after that pitch, I led a short 5-10 pitch, 5-9 pitch, something moderate pitch to the bottom of the 5-12, basically. And moving on, the next day, we get up there. Jesse sends the barbecue sauce pitch, as we're going to rename it. Jordan, you heard Jordan's story on the 12A, and then kind of, Jesse, I feel like you should kind of
I mean, I don't
steer us to the top.
I mean, from my perspective, it wasn't that big of a deal to get up to basically the last pitch. And we get to the last pitch, and I look down at these guys, and Jordan at this point is as cranky as I've ever seen him on the whole trip. He's
hypoglycemic at the very least.
He's pretty sad.
Jordan's sad. Everybody's wet. There's a moment where there's a moment where we thought we were on the summit pitch, and like I said before, Jesse's leading. I'm following. Jordan's third. Okay, so I get up to this pitch. I follow this pitch, and Jordan's like not following. Like he's not there. And I look down, and Jordan's basically fucking buck naked. He's wearing maybe his boxers, and he's drying out all his shit. And I'm like, it's fucking 5 p.m. and like we have shit to do. And Jesse's like, where's Jordan? What's happening?
I was looking at Jordan. I was like, what is Jordan doing?
And I was like, dude. It's you. Like I haven't even told Jordan this. I was like,
they had kind of gotten in a few spats at this point, and Matt just looks at me and he goes, if I say something, he's gonna flip. you have to ask Jordan to hurry up.
So this is Jesse's voice. Hey, Jordan.
Oh my gosh.
Just like, hey, Jordan, how are you doing down there?
No, it wasn't that at all. He's like, hey, Jordan, bud, can you speed it up a little bit?
Yeah. And Jordan was just like, I'm soaking wet. Everything is wet. I just need a minute. And I'm like, I told you. I couldn't say it. Okay.
But the problem is that with 3, you always need somebody moving. And all the rope was below us because it was a super long pitch. And so I had 20 feet of rope to work with. And Matt's at the anchor, and then all of a sudden, Jordan's got his clothes on, and he's just speeding up the pitch and climbed it in no time at all.
I'll be quick, but to defend myself, I got insanely wet leading that 5-12 pitch, right? And then we decided to move on, and I'm like, sick. Okay, I'm going to be the third now. Matt and Jess are going to lead us to the top. I'm going to get dry and comfy at this belay. And I do, while Jesse leads the first mountain pitch, and then Matt follows, and then it's my turn to follow. And therefore, Jesse's leading the second mountain pitch directly above it, And so I'm like, okay, I got my gloves on. This is my first ice pitch ever, okay? So I'm like, I got all my Gore-Tex on. I got my boots and my crampons, my gloves. I'm ready to go. And I'm starting swinging, and I'm figuring this ice climbing shit out, I'm like, oh, this is fucking dope. I'm doing it. And I'm dry finally. And then Jesse's leading the next pitch and just sends down an absurd amount of snow and ice that goes right down my fucking jacket, into my pants. And I was just like, oh, what the fuck? So I get up to the belay ledge, and I basically throw a hissy fit.
They make hoods for a reason.
Yeah.
Grumpy.
Yeah. So to anybody out there, put up your hood, I guess, so that doesn't happen. Because then I got to the belay and I was like fucking pissed. I was like, damn it, I just got dry and now I'm all wet again. And I'm like trying to put on my puffy pants because I'm freezing cold. And I'm like tripping over myself, my crampons and feathers are going everywhere. And so I basically kind of stayed in that mode following them for a few pitches.
I have amazing photos of this,
just
saying.
Yeah, he got a photo of me looking very uncomfortable and sad. And yeah, we got to this ledge and the sun was like just about to go around the corner and it had finally gotten clear. And I was like, oh, this is my moment. Like I need to dry out. I need to get dry. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to like summit probably. And then, yeah. They got upset at me, but I fired up that pitch. No problem. Once you yelled at me.
So I looked down at him. I'm like, oh man, we're like maybe 5 minutes from the summit. It's right there. And Jordan gets up there and I crest the top of what we can see. And I'm like, oh no, there's one more pitch.
And he belays me up and I'm like looking and I'm like, oh, I see it too. And I'm like, oh, it looks like a legit mountain pitch. Like from that side of Trango, like snow cap is steep, the rock is steep. If you're coming from the Eternal Flame, it's literally like a snow hike. At that point, we had committed we weren't going to do another 3 pitches to get around.
It's kind of almost like Peruvian looking at this point. It's like there's a lot of overhanging snow. And anyway, I quest up there and it was fucking complicated, to be honest. I mean, I had to go up and down and up and down. I had to leave my backpack. And then I guess I'll say it. Yeah, I went up and around and pulled all the cams so there wouldn't be rope drag, but there still was rope drag. And then I'm climbing this overhanging cornice and both tools rip. And I'm like 80 feet above my last piece of gear. And for whatever reason, my feet landed in the snow below me and I didn't pitch. So I was just like, okay, I guess I have to dig. And so I just dug and dug and dug and dug and dug and dug and then finally got through. These guys are wondering like, what the hell?
Yeah, we can't see him.
At this point, he's like around a corner.
And I get to the summit and I'm super relieved. And I'm like, how in the hell are they going to do this? I mean, it would be hard for a really seasoned ice climber to follow this pitch without being scared.
It's also just important to say, like, there's how the rope ran. It would have been just as dangerous for the second to follow it because it was like a do right traverse and then like around the corner. So it would have been really difficult and horrifying for 2. For 3, it would have been like I don't know what we would, with the ropes scene that we were running, it wouldn't have worked.
So I get this bright idea. I'm like, okay, if I can chop out this cornice and lower down on the gree and fix the rope to my backpack, basically where I left my backpack on a good piece of gear, these guys got a plumb line to climb straight up. And it looked climbable. There were some pitons even. I mean, there's all sorts of shit on that side of the mountain from all the ascents that had happened over the years. We saw portaledge hanging on the side of the wall. And so I'm just like, okay, line's fixed.
and I agreed to this, like having like spent the last couple seasons mixed climbing, I was like, oh, it doesn't look too bad. Maybe like in the M6 range, but like legit, like M climbing, like you climb a bunch of snow, which was mellow. Jordan had already done a bunch of that. And then you get to like a rock section where you're like kind of, you're mixed climbing. And how we had set it up is like, we're both following kind of at the same time. And Jordan's below me, I'm next. And I'm like literally like up there, like explaining Jordan, like how to like kind of mix climb. Cause he had like snow travel, did a little bit of ice climbing, but like not any like steep like M climbing, like where you're like literally like, so I'm like, okay, Jordan, this is what you're going to do. You're going to like hand jam the crack. You're going to like holster one tool, put one tool on your harness, and then like use the other tool to like get in the crack and like find the pick. And I'm like, that's it. And like in my mid description, like a tool rips and I like catch myself and I'm like, it's fine. You got it. Like, and I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, this is like, if Jordan pulls this off, this is going to be a miracle. And I get up there and Jesse had nicely like kind of dug out like the cornice because it would have been impossible for us to get through it without. And Jesse and I have our moment at the summit and he's like, do you think Jordan's going to be able to do it? And I'm like, yeah, probably. He's got it. It's like I think he's got it, and Jordan pulled it off. I don't know. Give us your experience of that. But for us, basically like there's lots of impressive moments from Jordan, lots of rock climbing in the snow, in the rain, and like wet conditions that like I think really impressed Jesse and I. But this was like a moment of true, like kind of beginner, like never having done any like hard tool climbing. And it's important to say, like, we were climbing in like cut like tools, like, so they were way short, like one like Extremes, which was like kind of like a really technical tool, and one like X-Lite, which is like a more of an alpine tool. So it's like not like mixed climbing in like the sweetest setup, you know, either. We're like, yeah. Like, we're going to take Jordan ice climbing and like real tools, and like,
I thought they were real tools. I've never seen real tools.
Yeah.
You mean
look like?
Yeah. So like, you know, well, Jordan, go on.
Well, I mean, you know, I'm just watching Jesse like get to the summit of this thing, and then him and Matt with their mountain experience, like talking about how we're going to get up there. And Matt's like, can we go direct? Like, can you fix a line? And he's like, yeah, like, I think you guys could Emmett. And I was like, Matt, like, what the fuck does that mean? I don't even know what that means, you know? And he explains it to me then, and then again, like when he's actually climbing it, like he said, and he made it sound like it's no big deal. And so I was like, oh, okay, it's no big deal. So just like figure it out, you know? And then, yeah, I did what he said, and I'm like hand jamming like this undercling, and I'm like front pointing with my crampons on these little footholds, I guess. I don't even know if I'm talking about this correctly. Right. And I have one tool, and I'm like putting it over my shoulder and like holding in my teeth, feel like Marc Andre, you know, from what I've seen.
You're gaming. Yeah, you were gaming.
And then I was like, well, there's like a fucking little seam in this crack, and I just looked at the tool, and I was like, that looks like a beak, right? It's a beak at the end of this ice tool, basically. So I just freaking hammered that shit in there, pulled on it, and I don't know. I just got to the summit. They're like, "Do you do that pitch?" And I was like, "Yeah." no big deal.
No big deal. Yeah. Respect. Yeah.
It was sick.
Nice.
Yeah, because I mean, not to forget that like the mountain pitches need to be freed too, whether they're ice, M, or mixed, whatever.
Yeah.
You know? If you can't climb the last pitch, you don't do the thing either.
Right.
So
yeah.
It was.
So
It was sick.
And you had a nice clear day.
Yeah. You know, at that point, it was starting to get overcast, but the summit was rad.
Did you guys tear up?
Dude, like immediately.
Oh, nice.
They had their moment up there. Jesse was up there the longest, obviously, then Matt, and then myself. And I don't know. It's interesting. I kind of had a moment at the saddle while they were, you know, while Jesse was leading this last pitch, because obviously that's the goal. That's the end of the mountain. That's the top of the route, and you're working towards that the whole time, but it never really feels attainable until not even that final day, you know. Our final day, we still had like 1,000 feet from our camp to the summit. And so not really until you're on the last few pitches where you actually see the summit, you're like, oh shit, it's like right there. You can start to entertain the idea of like, we're about to stand on top of this thing, you know. Whereas all the days and everything leading up to that, you don't really have time to think about it all that much. You're involved with what you're doing then and there, you know? And so to kind of finally realize like, oh shit, there's the summit. We're about to be on top. And then you start reflecting back on everything that it took to get there. The emotions hit pretty hard.
All right, folks, was that too much of a cliffhanger? So are you going to show up for the second half? I mean, fuck, what else are you doing? It's dark at 5 o'clock, at least in the northern hemisphere. I worked on it for a while trying to figure out a spot. There's so much meat to cut into. Anyway, if you're listening to this on the day I put it out, you got a couple days to wait for the tweener. That'll finish this thing up. Some great revelations in the second half. But most of you probably can just click right over to it. And you can follow Jordan, Jesse, Matt over on Instagram with varying levels of engagement. Also, Matt has a new YouTube series over at his YouTube channel called Never Skip Dinner. It's like climbing and cooking. And eventually there'll be an episode that I appear in, maybe. I'm in the trailer, so hopefully I made the cut on top of Castleton. All right, the holidays can be trying for climbers, at least here in the northern hemisphere. It's cold, the days are short, you have all these obligations. You can go ice climbing. There's some places you're still rock climbing, but you know what I mean. And if you end up at that holiday party trying to explain to your aunt or uncle how you don't actually climb without ropes like that Honnold guy, or you mostly don't, well, don't say mostly. Actually, just say you don't and move on. All right, it's not worth it. Definitely not worth it. But it's still a good place to check your knots.
Guys have underestimated me my entire life. And for years, I never understood why. It used to really bother me. But then one day, I was driving my little boy to school, and I saw this quote by Walt Whitman. It was painted on the wall there. It said, "Be curious, not judgmental." I like that. So I get back in my car, and I'm driving to work, and all of a sudden, it hits me. All them fellas that used to belittle me, not a single one of them were curious. You know, they thought they had everything all figured out, so they judged everything, and they judged everyone. And I realized that they're underestimating me. Who I was had nothing to do with it. Because if they were curious, they would ask questions. You know? Questions like, have you played a lot of darts, Ted? Which I would have answered, yes, sir. Every Sunday afternoon at a sports bar with my father from age 10 till I was 16 when he passed away.